Welcome back to One Comic Book a Day, where I won't have a computer for the rest of this week. So, I have a lot of time on my hands. Today we're going to do something a little different here, where I'm going to actually start talking about Superman Evolution, specifically story-wise this time, as we're going to get a little in-depth with Superman regards of the structure, and specifically the structure of Golden Age Superman stories. If you've been watching this channel, I've been recapping and giving a little review of each issue of Superman starting from the beginning, dealing with both Superman comics and Action Comics. So far I've done 40 to 50 through video, while I've done over 60 to 70 through written on my website. So I have a pretty firm idea of at least early Golden Age Superman stories. We'll see if this all sort of lasts when we get to like the late 40s to early 50s. The Golden Age still is the Golden Age in the 50s, even though I think that should be called the Dark Ages, but that's a later video, until we get to the Silver Age stories of the 60s. But right now, there's been a constant, and I kind of want to talk about it, and that's my problems with the current Superman structure, and by current I mean where I'm reading in the 1940s, and not right now, and how I would specifically fix them. You do not have to agree with what I'm saying, though I'd be surprised to find a lot of you who think that the Golden Age Superman stories are absolutely perfect or amazing for their time. Like, they can be fun, but they're not exactly the best stories. And you can completely disagree with how I want to fix them, but this is how I think you could fix the specific story without having to, tell kind of a modern story. Because they were going to put in the effort of character work or emotional stakes, but they could have at least done what I'm going to suggest here. So as for the structure itself, the comics rarely actually have a structure. They're pretty structureless. I would say about 80 to 90% of the comics I've read so far fall under sort of a mobster story, which if you've watched my videos, I complain about the mobster stories being uninteresting, because this is how a mobster story works in these comics. Maybe there's an introduction. Sometimes Superman just kind of gets involved, but maybe there's an introduction of something going bad. This lasts maybe a page or two. Remember, these are 14-page stories, so there's not a lot of time for plot. But Clark and Lois will find out about some sort of racketeering or mobster crime syndicate. Something bad has happened. Superman gets involved, stops generally a small amount of mobsters. This usually falls under this idea where Superman's going to show up, they're going to shoot at him, and the bullets are not going to work on him. And this is really the only sort of entertainment we get. It's the fun of the mobsters finding out that their guns, which give them their power, also their money, but mainly the guns and force give them their power, is not going to work on a person like Superman. And yeah, that is fun, but after like 10 issues of only just that, it gets boring very quickly. And you're like begging for something new, and eventually we do get the supervillains and sort of like mad scientists and crazier ideas for Superman to go up against. But that type of story is just not the thing that should be dominating a Superman story. Though I don't think they're all bad. I think you can tell a good version of that story. These are just not the good versions of said story. Like I said, he ends up fighting these guys, and then for the rest of the comic, he's usually jumping back and forth between different groups of mobsters, taking them out fairly easily, until he gets to their leader and deals with him. There is no rising action. Superman starts with fighting the mobsters and is just consistently fighting the mobsters, same level, until he gets to the bad guy. Maybe the bad guy has a bomb, or he's going to kill Lois, which adds some sort of stakes. Slight emotional, but not enough character work for that to be true, and we get a little bit of a rising action, but it's dealt with in maybe a page. There is no buildup of that tension. And that's basically 80 to 90% of the stories I've read. Like, I can tell a Superman story, specifically a Superman mobster Golden Age story, in my sleep. Though I would be hard-pressed to put that much dialogue as there is usually from Jerry Robinson. So you can see how, like, constantly reading that story would be very uninteresting. Superman fights mobsters, fights another group of mobsters, fights a third group of mobsters. None of them all that different in fight, takes out their leader. But there are some gleaming diamonds throughout. And some of them aren't mobster stories, but Robinson, especially like in the late 20s, started kind of figuring out a good Superman structure, but immediately sort of loses it afterwards. And this is basically the big way I would tell a Superman story. This is the structure I would tell a mobster Golden Age Superman story. We actually leave Superman out of it for at least half the comic. Like I said, there's only 14 pages, so we have like not a lot to tell a story. But the problem with the mobsters is I don't particularly care what they're doing. We see very little of like the actual threat. I understand there's a threat, and yeah, New York comic book writers really understood the threat of the mobsters because there were racketeering syndicates threatening them at the time. If you've ever read like Will Eisner's comic autobiography, there's a scene where Jack Kirby basically takes these guys on and they leave, because that's why Jack Kirby is amazing. He stood up to the mobsters. So yeah, this is a legitimate threat for them and would probably be a lot of fun to write about. But even if something's kind of true, doesn't make it interesting, especially not interesting to read over and over again. But if you follow this structure I would have given these stories, I think all of them could have worked and been interesting stories. And that is, as I said, splitting it into two. Why two? Well, the first half, the first act, would be the non-Superman Act. If you even watch like the 1950s Fleischer cartoons, there is like a buildup of the threat. You get like something rampaging or something going horribly wrong for a while that specifically tells us, oh God, something needs to stop this because we can't stop it. And then Superman shows up and deals with it. What I'm saying is the mobsters would be much more interesting to fight if you actually built up what their threat is. We see them actually doing bad things. There's a sort of idea in the story where we see a guy named Brute take over a city. That's actually a pretty good idea, because in that way we actually watch these different mobsters. We come to sort of know them. We don't really have to know them, but we come to see what they're doing. That's the importance. Like if we're watching, say, the police or even the political government getting pushed around by these mobsters and just everybody living a miserable life, just kind of building the arrogance and the awfulness to each of these characters, when Superman does eventually show up after we've set up and built the villains of the comic, it's so much more satisfying when Superman takes them down. And instead of having like the same action scene over and over again, we're able to kind of split that off. We could even actually have just one big action scene for the climax. We don't even have to have him fighting just the different groups of mobsters the same way over and over again. See, rising action. So at the start of the story, we see, I don't know, they're burning down buildings, they're shaking down cops, they're breaking into people's houses and taking their houses. Yeah, that's ridiculous. But remember, Superman is ridiculous. He needs a ridiculous threat for him to face. But just everything is utter anarchy, and they're basically under like a mobster dictatorship. And then you have Superman show up. Their guns, their money, nothing has been able to stop these guys. No one can even look them in their eyes. And then Superman shows up and their guns don't work. And just effortlessly, he is pushing these guys who have never been pushed back, have never like seen failure, just shattering their reality in front of their eyes. Isn't that just absolutely delicious to think about? What a weird word choice I chose there. But it is. It's so sweet. Because you've built up the threat. And you get that in, like, say, some of the more fantastical or weird stories where there's this, like, weird villain. The weird villain's doing weird stuff that no one quite understands. And then Superman shows up and that villain has no idea how to fight him. Or when Luthor is around. Why I keep saying Luthor stories are just better compared to all the rest is Luthor just brings threats. Superman will try to stop what he's doing, but Luthor's just kind of throwing everything he possibly can. Will acid work against him? Will missiles? And then after Superman has accomplished all that, he has like one big trump card that takes him down. So even though Superman is like just taking out trap after trap after trap, it doesn't feel like a linear path. It actually does feel like Luther's actions are rising because he's building towards his one big trump card, hoping that the other things will work on Superman. And another key part is, if you don't have that, just make it about saving people. Like I said about emotional stakes, there's not going to be much build on characters, but if you say you take a little bit of time, so we're not even structuring it in the 2-act way I want to say, but take him fighting a mobster after mobster after mobster type story, which most of these are, just have the mobsters, just have sort of like a scene that's set up with, I don't know, youths or people at a bank, and just have them sort of be put in a horrible situation. And because we've come to know them a little bit, we want them to be saved. And just do that again and again and again. That way there is a sense of a threat and changes in actions without there actually being one. There's tension, which lacks from a story where they're going to do something real quick and nothing they do when Superman shows up is going to work. We kind of just need to set up them as a threat. That's really the big idea I want to get across here. You need to give Superman some sort of threat. Preferably, it will be a hard threat for even him, but just having people in danger and looking like they're about to be shot over and over again, or thrown off something, or hit by a car, and have this happen more than once, because a lot of these comics will have that moment, but it will happen only once, and then it's just, well, I can take on every gangster then. But have like each gangster have its own little threat. And if you can make the threat bigger each time, say like falling off the building, catches him real quickly, bullet to the head, like right next to him, that's a little more dramatic than being thrown off the building because he has less time to save him. And then just really big explosion. There's an escalation of what's happening. So it's giving the sense of rising action without there actually being rising action. So these are the big ideas. A 2-act structure, 1. That 2-act structure, number 2, will all set up to the threat and then the payoff. Set up, payoff. And if you don't do those 2 steps, I have a completely different idea, and that is to make sure you're setting up in small amounts, not like half the comic, saving people to give the illusion of rising action. And that's how I would fix Golden Age Superman stories, and specifically the Golden Age mobster stories that are dominating the Golden Age stories for at least half the 40s. Okay, so that is it from me today. I'm hoping to do a little more videos on my opinions going forward. I know I do a lot of just like recapping, but like once I'm already being kind of snide during the recap, how much do I really have to say afterwards? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to get notifications when a new video goes up. I do this Monday through Friday, but Fridays I cover Batman. So either Detective Comics or a Batman story. And until next time, let's ponder the question, whatever did happen to the Man of Tomorrow? Bye!